described.
Okay.
So welcome. Good morning, everyone. Have we any apologies to note, John?
None received.
None received. Okay. We have the declarations of interest in the consent items, but just to make colleagues aware if there's any changes to the register or any declarations in respect of today's business, now is a good time to let us know. I don't see any hands. I have one change to the, well, I have two changes to the register, please, to be recorded. And that is that my husband stepped down as the chair of Stockport Foundation Trust on the 30th of April, and that he's been appointed to the board of NHS Property Services as of the 1st of May. So if that change could be made, please. But no declarations in respect of today. So that brings us fairly promptly, if we may, to the board story. Oh, sorry, John, see your hand up. You're on mute, John.
Just to flag up, but we've had a change to the declaration of interest for Mr. Killick, just to note that he's taken on a role with the healthcare company.
Thank you very much. Thanks, John. So that brings to the staff story, and a very warm welcome to Stacey Clark and also to her colleague Kate. You're both very welcome today, and we look forward to hearing your story. I have trailed it with my colleagues as a very interesting story of somebody who stepped up to a very big and important leadership role in the middle of a pandemic. So, you know, maybe that transition hasn't been what it will be in normal times. And also the glint you've had in your eye about a whole host of service improvements you're looking forward to making, and to maybe be able to give us a flavour of, you know, what some of the opportunities in terms of doing that are and what some of the challenges are. So that we kind of understand all of that a bit more fully, and indeed, of course, anything else that you feel minded to tell us. So, are we handing straight across, or do you want to say anything, Zoe or Krishna? No, straight across to you then, Stacey, if we may.
Yeah. So I'm Stacey. I'm the active matron on EMU at the present. I've worked on here for the last 13 years. I started on as a student nurse when I was in my second year of my training, and I absolutely loved it. So I asked the matron at the time if I could work on here when I qualified. He told me to come and get a healthcare job at the bank, so I did. And then when I qualified in 2009, I came and told him that I was ready now. So he gave me a chance. So I started on as a staff nurse, and after 2 years I got promoted to sister. And then I got the chance to be matron last June, July time, right in the middle of COVID. So it was quite a challenge. There was quite a few, it was really challenging for the staff with COVID. Staff morale was quite low, so it's been a challenge to try and keep everyone's morale up. So yeah, that's where we are at the moment. So at the moment I've got a few projects that I'm working on. One of the main ones that I'm wanting to get going is to put the tables back in the bay.
We lost Stacey.
We shall have to hope the Wi-Fi is reaching as far as EMU.
Doesn't like it is.
Desk.
Stacey, I don't know if you can hear us, but unfortunately we can't hear you very well.
It might be worth Stacey trying to turn off the video. Sometimes that helps a little bit. If she can hear us.
I wonder, I really would like us to hear Stacey's story, and I'd like us to hear it properly. I wonder if we might make arrangements for Stacey to have the opportunity to go to somewhere in the trust where there is a secure signal and connection, and then we could do it a little bit later on the agenda so we can actually hear her properly, because I just think it will be a great disservice and discourtesy that we can't hear her. Yeah. So could I ask that Gillian, maybe if we've got you on the call, you'd be kind enough to see if we can get Stacey to somewhere she can be heard, and we'll take her a bit later on. Okay, really sorry about that, but I think all we can do in the interests of hearing each other is move on with the agenda, and we'll go back to that staff story a bit further on. So, Angie, I'm going to go to you, please, for the Chief Exec's report.
Thank you, Helen. And Stacey had started to do me a brilliant introduction, and I know she will do an amazing job of telling us all the great stuff she's been doing. But in terms of staff morale that I just picked up on with Stacey there, really important, I think, that a couple of items I just want to pull out of my report around how we keep focused on supporting our staff at a time that most of us are feeling is a bit of one of reflection at the moment, in terms of having got through hopefully the worst of the pandemic, and trying to think and work towards where we go from here. So some real positives that I've drawn out in my report around some of the innovation that staff are doing, and I know Stacey will talk through her particular areas in a moment, and really wanted to emphasise that energy and support that people are still feeling in our organisation, and how proud we are of everyone in keeping that going through difficult times. We know we're not always getting it right, and we're a work in progress. Zoe and Abby will talk through our staff survey and our FTSU half-year report, so some learning for all of us in there about how we continue to support our staff going forward. Helpfully and positively, our COVID patient numbers are extremely low at the moment, but I just wanted again to take a moment to think about colleagues who have family and friends and colleagues in India at the moment. The NHS is responding nationally and supporting our colleagues out there, but just want to pass our thoughts from board to those colleagues who have got family and friends in India. The other area I wanted to pull out of my report is around the system working. Lots and lots happening at the moment, and I think again some real positivity around how we're working together in different ways, and that's going to grow and grow over coming weeks and months. And again, some challenges about what that means for our staff on the front line, what it means in governance terms for those of us working in Joined Up Care Derbyshire, and an eye to the future on what's happening nationally, both in terms of legislation, but also you will have seen, and since I wrote my report, that Simon Stevens, Chief Exec of the NHS, has announced his intention to stand down at the end of July. So clearly lots happening nationally that we'll need to respond to, and a few items on the agenda you'll see today around maternity and planning for this year that the team are working hard on, and we'll pick up further along. So those were the areas, Helen, that I particularly wanted to highlight.
Thanks very much, Angie. Any thoughts, comments or questions prompted by Angie's report? No, all very content to note your report, and again with thanks and appreciation, Angie, for everything that you've drawn to our attention, both in your remarks there and indeed in your report that's been achieved in the trust since we last met. So I'm going to move on, if I may now, please, to item 4, which is the National Staff Survey. Zoe, please.
Thank you, Helen. And just before I move into that, Stacey, I don't know if you can hear me, but Gillian's going to get in touch with you, suggest you come to my office where the Wi-Fi is a bit better. So as Helen said, we can hear your story clearly and without any interruption, so we can hear it properly. So just bear with us, please.
All right, thanks, Zoe.
Okay, so that was what Gillian just popping ahead in there. So staff survey results. These are 2020 staff survey results. The embargo was lifted in March, so finally we can talk about them in the public board, which is good because it feels like it's been a little while since we did the survey. Survey was undertaken last autumn, so obviously during a difficult and uncertain time for everybody, not just for Heroes Trust, but for everybody. Overall, they're a positive set of results and do show continuing improvement that we've seen over the last kind of couple of years. As always, there are areas that we want to keep doing better, and we want to see further change. Overall, they reflect a positive picture. I think my own reflection is that during the pandemic, we've worked really hard in terms of how we look after our people, to be true to our leadership style and our values in how we support and care for our people, really. And I do think that's reflected in the results overall, particularly in a pandemic year. The results have obviously been out for nearly a couple of months now, so a lot of work's been happening already. So the local conversations are happening in departments, wards across the organisation, and they're due to run until the end of May, so over a period of a couple of months. And that's, as in previous years, that's really about getting input from local teams, so sharing the results and talking about what's great, what do we want to keep doing more of as a team, and also what can we do together to improve, and what do we want to change, to really understand what people are saying behind the feedback. And at a trust-wide level, the two main areas of focus for this year are around health and wellbeing and values and behaviours, two quite broad themes, and lots of work ongoing and planned under both of those, which People Committee continue to be cited on and have oversight of, including at their most recent meeting. So I will sort of leave it there for comments and questions.
Well, as you say, Zoe, a very encouraging set of results in any year, let alone a pandemic year. I see some hands, but I'm going to go in the first instance, if I may, please, to Jeremy in his capacity as Chair of the People Committee, who will have been very close to this journey we've been on over a number of years. So, Jeremy, thoughts and comments from you first, please.
Thank you very much, Helen and Zoe. And indeed all staff who've contributed to these really very, very impressive scores. I think we've had the opportunity to discuss these in private prior to now, so we don't need to spend a lot of time saying how proud we are of the overall results here. And of course, at People Committee, we've been looking at these in more detail, and also looking at the action plans from divisions and so on as to how they responded last year, looking at that. At the impact of those, the work they did last year, and beginning to think about how they respond to this. The one thing, having said that, and overall the results are really good. The one thing that I do think we have to acknowledge and take note of is the scores with regard to ethnic minority staff, and in particular the percentage of staff reporting harassment, bullying, or abuse. And it depends on the numbering of the papers that you look at, but on the pages that I'm looking at, it's on page 52 is a particular graph that's of most concern, where the proportion of BME staff who report that has gone up from having been 23%, went down last year to 16, sorry, the year before last to 16, and in 2020 it went up to 31.9%. And clearly, that is something that we have to take note of and be concerned about and do something about. And I'm pleased to say that Krishna and I were able to join the Royal Cultural Community group yesterday afternoon, of which this was being discussed. And the first thing, obviously, is to get a better understanding as to what this information is telling us, but then also, crucially, to move then on to doing something about it. And I don't think we've got time to talk about all of the different things that are being considered and done in that space, but I just think we need to recognise that in what is overall a terrifically good set of results, there are some patches that we do need to pay a bit more attention to. And I can see Zoe and Krishna nodding there.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Sue.
Thanks, Helen. And yeah, just to echo Jeremy's point, I know we have had time to look at these in a lot of detail as a board, But I just think it is worth noting that it is a fantastic set of results, and I just want to congratulate the exec team. Really, it would have been so easy during the last year that has been endured for this to have not been a focus, and for us to have focused, you know, on everything else that the teams have had to get through. So I think it's particularly noteworthy that not only have we, you know, stuck to all of the great things that were always in train, but have really amplified all the things around well-being at a time when it was ever more critical. And I think that's, you know, we should just celebrate that, you know, kind of for a second, a very small whoop, because it would have been very easy for this to fall by the wayside. And actually, I think what the team have done is really dialed it up, and I think that shows in the results. So I just wanted to note that. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. I don't see anybody else wanting to come in, not least of all because this is probably our fourth or fifth time to have the conversation, but really important not only that we bask in the success of the approach, but to celebrate it publicly, which is, of course, the opportunity we've got today for the first time discussing them in public. I'd like to come back to Zoe, please, if I may, just for a few thoughts and comments about Jeremy's remarks. So you told us that you've got work planned under two broad headings, and it'd be good to know, Zoe, the extent to which you think they will prove the right umbrellas for a particular focus on the areas of BME, where there's clearly less staff satisfaction against a number of measures, and also across all groups in respect of harassment, bullying and abuse. So what our specific focus will be, and whether they will sit under the two main headings you've described.
Yes, thank you, Helen. I did want to sort of clarify on that on the back of what Jeremy said, which I agree with what you said there, Jeremy. The values and behaviours strand would very much incorporate these areas of work. So there's a lot of activity at the moment around diversity, inclusion, inequalities, and there's a real focus on education. So we're doing a lot of really focused sessions with teams and with leadership teams. Education sessions, thought-provoking sessions is the feedback that we've had. Sometimes a bit uncomfortable, really making people think about things. We've done sort of seminars on things like discrimination. There's more sessions planned around allyship, etc., etc. It sounds like the Royal Cultural Community had a good flavour of that yesterday evening too. So it was a focus for us last year, and it's something I feel really passionate about as well. So it is a focus for the following year. I know Abby's really connected in with that too. In terms of broader groups, so you know, all different groups across the workforce, the work that we sort of started pre the pandemic around civility and respect, which we're picking up again a bit more. So I don't know if the board remember things like cups of kindness, for example, and sharing some of those be kind messages. That kind of group of people and that work plan is starting to pick up again as well. So all those things do firmly sit within the values and behaviours.
Very, very comforting and encouraging. So thank you, Zoe. I think we're also committed to more regular pulse surveys for this coming year, which I'm sure will help us make sure that the actions that are in place will keep us on track to really shifting the dial on this in 12 months' time. So very well done, and thank you. Can I check, Zoe, has Stacey appeared at your office yet?
Yes.
Very good. I'm conscious that
I have Stacey and Kate with me. Shall we move to them next?
Let's move to them next. They have patients to look after, so they can't be attending our pleasure all morning. So it will be good to go straight back to that item if we may. Apologies, Stacey. We didn't only want to catch every second or third word. This is far too important not to hear it properly. But apologies, it's taken more of your time than might otherwise have been the case. No, we got as far as, and I was just really looking forward, you said it got as far as, and one of the first things I want to do are get desks back in the bays. Right. And at that point, we didn't hear anything else.
Right, okay then. So yes, I'd like to get the desk back in the bays. Previously, we had a desk in bay 2, 3, 4 and 5. We didn't have one in bay 1 because that's outside the nurses station is outside the bay, so you could see it well. The advantages of having the desks in the bays is that you've got someone present in the bay, you've got a nurse that can go and sit in there, they can do their work, they'd have a computer in there, a telephone in there, they'd have all their equipment that they need, such as your venipuncture equipment in there, urine sample pots and everything like that you might need in the bay. You're visible, your patients can see you, they know that you're looking after them, they can ask you questions, they can ask if they need any help, if they need the toilet. They don't have to wonder who it is that's looking after them. You're there. You can see if there's anyone that looks particularly unwell, if there's anybody that is climbing out of bed because they need the toilet because they haven't got the cognition to ask you to go to the toilet. So it provides better patient care, and it's a lot safer because you can obviously see your patients. So I think you'd reduce falls, I think you'd reduce complaints, I think that you'd get better feedback from your patients, from your relatives, because they wouldn't be having to walk out the bay to look round to say who's my mum's nurse or who's my dad's nurse. It'd be quite evident that the person who was sat in there was the nurse that was looking after their mum or their dad. So they could just come and ask you, and you get a better relationship with your patients when you're sat in there because you've got a better rapport, because they can just have a little chat with you. You can still do your work, you can still sit there and do your documentation, which is really important, but you can talk to your patients, you're not out of the way. Whereas if you stood in the corridor with your notes and you're doing your work, it clutters everywhere up, you've got things everywhere, everyone's in the corridor, and it doesn't look very professional, I don't find. So I think it would provide a lot better patient care. The second thing that I was looking at was to provide level 1 bed, shall we say, on EMU, so not HDU.
I wonder, Stacey, most unusually, we normally let people do their story and then we have a few remarks afterwards. I wouldn't mind pausing at various parts in your story, because I know it's going to be fairly rich. And Hal's already put a comment in that, that's a fabulous idea in terms of patient care. And, the unlocking of it is about patient flow and length of stay so that we, need less beds. So, I mean, this is a self-evidently good thing to do. It would hugely improve, but not only patient care and safety, but patient experience. I suppose it'd be just helpful to have comments from colleagues about, are we going to be able to make this happen in our lifetime, or are we going to be just pursuing the Holy Grail? Any thoughts?
Helen, I'm sorry, I can't put my hand up, but it's perhaps worth noting that we did have this in our lifetime, because it is only 2 or 3 years ago that the desks were removed because we had a bed crisis at the time. And what tends to happen is we have good aspirations to do this because it really does make a difference for patients, but then short-term pressures stop it happening. And Stacey will probably remember, the particular crisis where it all occurred.
I do.
It would be great, and I know Berenice and the whole kind of flow team are working really hard on improving length of stay and improving patient flow around SDEC and ED and so on. So I really hope we will be able to do it in our lifetime. I think it's something that would be very worthwhile.
Berenice, please, and Krishna then.
Thanks, Helen. Hal's really covered it, and we're absolutely aspirational to get this back in place. I think we just need to make sure that it's taken in the context of, we're also looking at improvements that we need to make on site, and as a result of those improvements, it impacts on some of the bed base for periods. So it's just kind of putting everything into context. And I have to make a comment to you, Stacey, as well. You mentioned the word "sat" quite often in your presentation. I've not seen many of you sitting around at all, so you probably wouldn't be sitting at those desks. But I just think the whole concept of being in those bays is one we absolutely should aspire to achieve. Thanks.
Thank you.
Is your hand now down, Krishna? Are you in furious agreement, or is there anything you want to add?
No, I was just going to add. I think yes, Helen, in our lifetime, in a very short space of time, we can get together and work out the best option for doing this that doesn't compromise flow. That I absolutely understand sort of what Stacey's saying. To me, it's the relationship with the patients. It's that sort of front loading and making sure that the patients feel safe. If they feel safe, we're likely to get better outcomes actually for patients, which will in turn reduce sort of length of stay. It's absolutely the right thing to do. Really sort of great safety initiative. And yes, I think we can have a conversation later this week on what we can do to try and sort of enable that. Glorious. Thank you for the first one, Stacey. Carry on. I'm sure you've loads more for us.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the second initiative that I'm trying to push through at the moment would be to have 6 level 1 beds, shall we call them, which would have 3 in bay 1 and 3 in bay 2, so 3 male, 3 female beds, which would be higher level beds. So there won't be HDU beds. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not wanting to take HDU patients on EMU, but would be able to take sicker patients and get them. The idea would be to get them better so that they wouldn't need to go to HDU. They wouldn't hit the HDU door. So it'd be patients from GPs that would be maybe generally if we had answered the access phone and they told us their observations and what the problem was, then we might say, oh no, you're too unwell, you need to go to ED, because we don't have monitoring on EMU at the moment. But the beds that would have, the 6 beds would be monitored beds with Philips monitors in them. Would need to have the nurse in that bay plus an extra nurse. So an ALS qualified nurse, which the sisters on EMU, 99% of them are already ALS qualified, and the ones that aren't qualified are due to go on the course this year, and an extra healthcare. So it would be extra spending on the staff, but then you'd reduce the pressures on ED because you'd have less patients going through ED who would be the ones that need more attention and maybe would need the resource. You'd reduce the pressures on HDU because the patients that might have needed to go to HDU, if they get that intense care on EMU with the monitoring, we might be able to turn them around so they don't get more unwell, so that they need that monitoring, such as your DK patients, your patients that just need that hours intense nursing, the fluids, the catheterization, and then you can turn them around, they can be getting better and they'll end up going to the ward rather than needing to go to HDU. And like I said, they wouldn't at ED's doors. So that was my second initiative that I'm trying to get off the ground.
That's super. Thank you again, Stacey. And we'll pause again. We've spent many hours in this board talking about bringing improvement to the front line and enabling people to kind of go forth and see good things to do and make them happen. And again, it's just lovely to hear another example of that in real time. Thoughts from colleagues about how easy this is likely to be for Stacey to do, or anybody else who had a kind of similar idea about innovation? Berenice.
Thanks, Helen, and thanks again, Stacey. I think it's a concept that has been introduced onto a lot of acute medical units, that they have kind of a high dependency area. So it's certainly worth looking at. We obviously need to take it in the context of the developments that we're doing around critical care and the beds that we have, the ability to support people on Markham as well. So absolutely happy to pick that up in the discussions around our kind of operational next steps. So yeah, thanks for raising that, Zoe. I'm saying Zoe now, Stacey.
Thank you.
You're sitting above a label that says Zoe, that's why.
Oh, right. Fair enough.
Jane, please.
Thank you, Helen. I had the real pleasure to meet Stacey and her team with Zoe last week. And I guess what I would like to say is great ideas, great innovation. there's a lot of things, a lot of factors in play for Stacey to make these things happen. There's a lot of interdependencies, which I absolutely get, you know, when we're thinking about flow, etc. But when we're thinking about different models of care, I was thinking about how we're supporting our staff to actually go out and see how other units work. So we were talking on the visit about Stacey visiting local partners, but we were also thinking about how she gets to know about centres of excellence and how she might be able to visit those places. But I guess I'm kind of a little bit worried that there's so many things in play with these things that it might take us quite a long time. And I wonder if there's any opportunity for us to pilot any of Stacey's initiatives so we can get the evidence to show what works and what supports flow or what supports our ED management, rather than trying to get everything in place at the outset, because, you know, sometimes these things take a long time, and a pilot sometimes will prove the case and actually will help us.
Great idea. Thank you, Jane. Krishna.
Thank you, Helen. So I absolutely think it sounds a brilliant idea, but I think the first steps is obviously gathering that baseline data. So I think it's working with Leadership Academy to try and support getting sort of the understanding of what cohort of patients and where best placed. And it may be EMU, but it may well be, it could be our one of our medical wards that might be the best place if it's seen as a cohort. So absolutely brilliant to come up with the idea. I think we need to support Stacey to have a look round. I agree now that we can start to venture out and do some of that visiting other areas and centres of excellence. But I think first steps is to get Stacey in touch with Stacey, actually, or other Stacey in the Leadership Academy, to try and support some of the baseline data.
Thank you. Lee.
I think this conversation is really rich and in the space of that sort of CUSA practice in the Improvement Academy. And there's this real balancing act around how do we enable staff to have a go with the right information around them without sort of bedlam that gives me palpitations in the financial control environment about, oh, crikey, I've now got 1 million healthcare assistants I didn't know we were going to get. So I think it's just how can Stacey tap into some of that and enable staff to give some of these things a go? Because I think in the olden days, we might be sat here looking at a long list of cost pressures and me with a red pen. There's something about operating in a slightly more agile way with frontline staff enabled to give these things a go. And it's just how do you get that balance right between the control environment and enabling that to happen? So hopefully we're moving in that space. So I think with a bit of support from the Improvement Academy, we should be able to give this a go.
And they're really interesting comments, Lee, particularly when coupled with the remarks I made in my introduction about new leaders stepping in at a new time. We've quite a lot of new ward leadership. And I think, you know, there's something about how it is we kind of team these colleagues who are brimming with good ideas and enthusiasm up with support to make them happen, so that we don't do to this new cohort what arguably happened to some of the older cohort, which is, well, I had brilliant ideas, but it was very difficult to make them happen, so I've stopped having them. So there's something about how it is we work with the grain of that determination and enthusiasm in the ways colleagues have described. So we're back to you, Stacey, now.
Okay. They were my main ideas, and I'd be really keen if I could pilot, like Jane has just said, with the tables. If we could just have 2 tables in the base to start off with and pilot it, because the evidence that I've got from this month from my falls data is out of 12 falls that I've had in the unit, 7 have been in the bag. So I just wanted to get that across to say that the data is showing that it is happening in the bay, because we now have doors on the bays, which is also a problem because you can't hear patients through the doors, and patients can't get out of the doors independently because there's only one door that opens properly, and people with the Zimmer can't fit through it. So
and that's a really important point, isn't it, in terms of patient safety, Stacey? But it's also an important point in terms of Lee's argument around cost, because we don't have the data in front of us, but I feel sure those people will have stayed in hospital longer than they would have otherwise. And if you kind of keep multiplying out each bed night, It of course goes a long way, but we know that in the NHS we're challenged to see the kind of whole life cost of initiatives as opposed to the kind of on cost of getting them started. So again, you raise another important consideration. And just in conclusion, to share something else you shared with me, Stacey, but I did ask you about the help and support you'd had in starting off in this senior position during COVID, and you're absolutely flowing with praise and admiration for all of those around you who have helped get you settled and orientated in the role. But again, we've just heard in the context of the staff's story, and indeed in other discussions around this table, about how we're going to redouble our efforts in kind of some of the initiatives that you would otherwise access had we not been in the position we were. So it was really good to hear from you how good that was, and you have every chance and expectation now of it getting even better. So so thank you very much for that. I'm conscious we've had a good conversation as we've gone along, but any concluding remarks from colleagues? No? We apologise for taking longer than we should have to release you back onto your day, Stacey. And we're very grateful for you making the time to come and be with us. And thank you, and very well done. And well done to Kate there in the background too, and of course to your team. I always say you get the team you deserve, but clearly you have a very magnificent team, and I'm sure it's well deserved. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me a chance to come and speak. All right, nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, Zoe back in.
Thank you. Bye.
Just shuffle the seats, and we note the remark in the chat from Lee about the fact that we're on a promise for glorious Wi-Fi, the length and breadth of the trust. So we'll be holding you to that one. Thanks, Lee. So that brings us back now a bit further down the agenda to item 5, which is the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian report. We have this twice a year, and it's time for us to have it again today. Are you going to introduce this, Angie?
I'll hand straight over to Abby, and I'm sure Beverly will pick up points once Abby's presented a summary. Thank you.
Lovely. Abby, floor's yours.
Thank you very much. As you can see in the paper this time round, we've had the highest number of cases so far for a reporting period, and each time I'm reporting, cases are increasing with each report. And that's a really good thing, because it means more people are speaking up, but there's a point at which you think, is it definitely a really good thing? So I sought some reassurance from the National Guardian's Office just to say, people are really speaking up, we're really pleased about that, but our numbers are really high compared to some of the areas around us. And they explained that as long as the cases are increasing with other measures such as the Freedom to Speak Up Index score, which is a score that's based on 4 questions from the staff survey, as long as that score is increasing, along with the numbers of people speaking up increasing, that is a really good measure which demonstrates that the culture, the speaking up culture in our organisation is improving. So that's sort of really reassuring. There's also been a new question this year from the NHS staff survey, which is specifically around speaking up, and we've scored 75.4% in that, which is well above the national average. So it is also a really good indicator that our culture is improving. And positively, we've recently been approached by other trusts as well to ask, they want to learn what we're doing to get so many staff to speak up. So that's a positive sort of spin on it as well. I have included some case studies in Appendix 1 to demonstrate some of the work undertaken to support the improvement more widely. But Board can be assured that I'm confident there are no systemic issues in the Trust for Board to be significantly concerned about. In the 2 categories which the National Guardian's Office collects data on, which is one is patient safety or concerns relating to patient safety or quality. The other one is cases which involve an element of bullying and harassment. With those kinds of cases, I do believe that Board can be assured that there are no systemic issues in either of these categories. For this reporting period, the number of cases involving bullying and harassment has has decreased, which means that for the first time we have more patient safety related cases than bullying and harassment cases. it's not clear yet whether this is in line with the national picture, just because we've not got the national reports out yet, but any patient safety concerns or quality of care concerns that have come my way, I feel have been addressed promptly as necessary. Unfortunately, I have been made aware of pockets where there are concerns about bullying and harassment, and these have been escalated to the executive team as necessary. And I also plan to be part of and support the wider pieces of work even that Zoe was referring to earlier on, such as the being part of the Respect and Civility group. As Jeremy mentioned, I attend Royal Cultural Community as well, and we're really trying to, Krishna was there yesterday as well, and we were talking about how we really need to try and make more staff aware of that as much as possible, and to see that as a safe space to come and share any concerns that they might have, and know that I'm available should they need to talk to me about any of that, either in the group or out with the group, but just to make sure that people know that that support's available for them, and that that is a safe space for staff. So we were really talking yesterday about how we really need to promote that, and make sure that everybody knows that that's there for them. With 22 champions, I think we have now supporting the Freedom to Speak Up agenda across the trust, and so Angie has come and met the champions, and Beverly's come and met the champions as well, which has been really good and shows real good support. So they've been really helping to spread the word about the Freedom to Speak Up agenda. The communications team have been fabulous. The executive team have been fabulous, and I've gone around and done listening sessions or walk-arounds with some of the executive team, which has been really good for engaging and showing support for Freedom to Speak Up. And I think that's all really helping, and that's helping to sort of bring cases my way. But the next real step is it's brilliant that people are speaking up to me, but what we really want is for people to now be speaking up to their managers and to feel able to do that. But for that to happen, we need to prepare and support the managers to be able to listen and to be able to respond and give them the tools that are necessary for that. So part of that will come through, I'm hoping, through the National Guardian's Office e-learning packages, which have been released. So we've already, Zoe and I have widely promoted the package that's for all staff, and we've explained that it's not a mandatory package, but we really encourage people to complete it because it helps them to see what's available for them in terms of support, and that's had a really good initial uptake. The next bit is the managers. It's called, the first bit's called Speak Up. The managers bit is called Listen Up. So that's recently been released, and then we're just waiting for the next bit to be released as well, which is follow up for leaders, and then we'll work at promoting those training packages all round for everyone. But in addition to that, I've created some manager training and a Freedom to Speak Up handbook for managers, which I'm really, really keen to roll out to every manager within the organisation, because I think it's really important to give, as you've mentioned, there are lots of new leaders, and I think it's really important to provide the skills to be able to kind of have these conversations with people and to be approachable. And so I'm currently working specifically with one of the divisional leadership teams to work out how best to roll that out in that division. And then as that, hopefully that will work, and then I can implement that in the other divisions as well. And I always sort of say that once nobody's speaking to me anymore and they're speaking up where they are, then I'll be redundant, and I know I've done a good job. But actually, I think that people will always want to have somebody impartial and separate from everything to speak up to, and I've certainly seen that a lot more recently, where people just feel like they need to talk to someone. Their managers are great and they've got no issues with their managers, but they just want to talk to somebody who's not involved in anything, doesn't know the people or the situation, and sometimes it's just that they want to talk so that they can get out whatever it is in their minds, and they can kind of rationalize things, and then they want to go forwards themselves and go and speak to whoever it is they might need to speak to themselves, but they just needed to talk that through with someone first. So I think there will always be a need for that, but I'm really hoping that with all of this extra stuff that we've got planned, that we will encourage speaking up more across the board everywhere. So that's me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abby. And you'll see some lovely comments in the chat about what a fabulous job you're doing, and how everybody who finds somebody to listen to is saying just that. So a big thank you for all you've achieved. Beverly.
Thanks, Helen. I think it's worth putting in perspective. When we first launched the Freedom to Speak Up initiative, we had 12 cases in the year. And in the last quarter alone, you'll see from the figures we had 126. So it really is quite extraordinary, the advances that we've made. And Abby, I just can't speak her praises highly enough. She only devotes 24 hours a week to this. And it really is remarkable. She seems to be everywhere around the trust. But I do also know that there's absolutely no complacency. When we look at the figures and say over 75% of staff are happy to speak up, then I know Abby wrestles with so why do 25% not feel able to speak up? And I do think it's a range of issues. I think particularly in the last 2 quarters, there's been a lot of mental health issues. Our staff are under incredible stress. And I think, as Abby said there, they feel more comfortable often speaking with her rather than maybe raising it with a manager. So I think on balance, absolutely fabulous report. Great to see so much work going into training and so many more managers engaging. So very, very happy, and board can be assured.
Thank you very much, Beverly. Sue, please.
Thanks, Helen. I just wanted to say thank you to Abby as well. I really enjoyed reading the report. I'm really pleased to see the e-learning. I really love the simplicity of those packages. So I'm looking forward to seeing those add a lot of value, because as Bev says, wonderful though you are, being everywhere is quite difficult all of the time. I also just wanted us to note the point that you made there about, we're being asked by others about how have we done it. And also, Zoe's got the same thing about our staff survey results as well. And I think we should just note again, as a Chesterfield, that celebration of, being so successful that others ask us how we do it. So we mustn't lose that either. And then I had one final question, which is quite detailed. You mentioned in your report about the RPC and that you've obviously not been able to be as present there. Given that you do only have so many hours in a day, I just wondered if you could just tell us a little bit more about your plans for getting around the RPC a bit more. Thanks, Abby.
Just hold on to that one for a moment, Abby. I'm sure there'll be more, and we'll come back to you in a moment. Keith.
Thanks, Abby, and like others, an amazing report. I was interested in the figure you show there with the difference between a couple of other trusts and us in terms of the way. Do I presume that the difference is that we've created an environment where people feel happy to speak up, and that's why our numbers have continued to increase? Because I am presuming in those other trusts, it's not that they don't have issue, it's that perhaps people don't feel comfortable to speak up. Am I reading that right? I just wanted to see if that was what I was drawing from that.
Yeah, Bill, hold on to that one a moment. Lee.
Thanks, Helen. Thanks, Abby. I was just the themes over time section of the report, Abby. I guess there's a huge richness in this feedback about the channels that then we take around really going after those improvement ideas and prioritising them. It feels as if there are elements of those themes that you can, without being too simplistic, you can deal with yourself. Are you content you've got a route into the organisation for this stuff to make sure we're optimising the use of this feedback? I guess would be my, how do we do this even better type question? So it might be worth holding that and perhaps responding to it, because I think there's a richness now in this stuff when we're getting better at it around, are we channeling it all in the right direction from your perspective?
Thanks, Lee. Atul.
Yeah, just a few quick points. I mean, I think it's really great to see that we're punching above our weight in this. The data clearly shows that. Well done. And second point I'd like to make is that in the kind of growing ICS space, joined up care, Derbyshire and so on, I think this model is very, very useful for other types of institutions like local government. It's been my observation. It's something that I'm trying to sort of promote here in Leicestershire as well. So I think it's something that, as we come together, it could be very useful to go beyond just the NHS on all of that. And I think the third point is, whilst of course, it would be great to have managers also being more open to be talked to. I think, Abby, you said it, hit it on the nail that people want somebody else to go and speak to. So I hope we don't really lose that. Thank you.
Thank you, Atul. Zoe.
Thanks, Helen. I just wanted to say thank you to Abby for the support and time that you give to the various strands of kind of supporting our people work that we do. We've talked about some of it already. So things like Be Yourself and Royal Cultural Community and Civility and Respect, recognising your limited hours. I do think your sort of input and contribution and presence in some of those arenas as well is really valuable. So I want to say thank you for that too.
Thank you, Zoe. Abby, you've got at least 4 substantive questions by my reckoning there. So, and as far as you feel able or appropriate to respond now, please do.
Thank you. Please remind me if I've forgotten any of them, if I've not written them down. So in response to the question about Royal Primary Care, so I do have a champion in Royal Primary Care already, who I keep in regular contact with, and she is really well placed in that she travels around the various different sites within Royal Primary Care. So she and I sort of keep in contact, and she lets me know what's going on and how I can support. Before we talked about whether doing some virtual freedom to speak up training sessions with different groups of staff might help to spread the word about speaking up, but I think what I'm really keen to do is, as soon as it's allowable, is to get in there in person, and because I think nothing really beats that, and that's been my experience, is that if I can get in to see people in person, that they're more interested and they respond better to it and they want to know more about it. So as soon as I can do that, that's what I want to do. But in the meantime, as I say, I do have a champion who's really promoting speaking up. There's also the National Guardian's Office are also doing some work around trusts who have also got primary care within them. So it's building on trying to get some ideas from other guardians that are involved in that network as well, and find out what else we can do. Some of the other guardians have done things where they've put a champion in every GP surgery, and as a way of sort of promoting and supporting. So it's sort of looking at as to whether or not we're going to do something along those lines. But again, champions is something where I feel you can't pick somebody and tell them they need to be a champion. It needs to be something that they want to do and that they're interested in. So it's kind of getting people on board and getting people engaged to be able to do that. And in terms of with other organisations and why our numbers are higher than theirs, I think it is that going by what the feedback that I've had, it is that people do feel more able to speak up and people are more aware of it. And I think the message isn't just coming from me and our organisation, it's coming from Angie and from Beverly and Zoe and everybody, and it's part of our new the word's completely gone out of my head. It's part of our new plan, bigger plan.
Strategy.
Thank you. It's part of our new, and that's something that's just sort of, it's integral to it. And I think that people are becoming more and more aware of that it's not just me that's banging on this drum. We are banging on this drum as an organisation. So I think that's why our numbers are there, where they're not so much necessarily there in other organisations. So it is a really positive thing, and it's just about kind of keeping it going. Thank you, ethos as well, Hal. And then from what Lee was asking in terms of the theme, so I think the really good thing with being able to develop themes now is identifying what else we can do. So one of those, which Zoe's probably sick of me saying, human factors training. A huge part of the themes are around communication. And I really believe that the more people know about human factors and understand that, and that enables them to reflect and understand where other people are coming from, I think that would have a really big impact. But now I've met with our new human factors lead, and we're going to work some sort of bits and pieces out together as to what training we can provide or what support we can provide together to address that theme. And then in terms of some of the issues around potential leadership, I'm really hoping that manager training will within Freedom to Speak Up will help with that, which is really, again, well supported throughout the organisation. Mental health issues or wellbeing issues, again, really well promoted. So it's all kind of feeding in. But as well as that, I've been able to take my themes and I've worked with Trudy Stringfellow in OD, and we've created a plan by comparing my themes with the staff survey themes, and we've worked out some specific things that we want to do at an organisational level to try and address some of the issues that are going on. And then just talking about, I think Atul mentioned about applying things like freedom to speak up beyond the NHS. It reminded me of a comment that another Guardian made where somebody was giving some evidence in the Grenfell inquiry, and one of the comments that they made is somebody that was working with one of the building companies, as they said, well, I had nowhere to go, there was nobody I could speak to, and that was a real kind of indicator that actually freedom to speak up could be a really beneficial thing for lots of other organisations, not just the NHS. Have I answered everyone's questions?
You've done very well, Abby. Thank you very much. And again, on a fabulous report, which of course is the culmination of a load of hard work. So we're very grateful. I'm going to give the last word to Angie.
Thanks, Helen. And yes, you've summed it up brilliantly, Abby. And I just wanted to reflect back to board our conversation from last week, where Abby was sharing with me some perspectives from other Guardians. And I don't think we should underestimate where other NHS organisations, let alone local authority or other sectors, are in terms of freedom to speak up. And it sort of took me back a bit, that other people still see it as a tick box exercise and don't give the time, energy and commitment to it that we do as a board. So I just wanted people to bear that in mind as we think about how we support Abby going forwards. And I'm sat here thinking that Freedom to Speak Up Guardian at some point will be your wrong title. You won't be made redundant, but you will be that person that we can just go and talk to, where people want that objective view. We've got a bit of a way to go, but I think we just need to celebrate where we are now, but keep that focus going forwards.
Have you had a further thought, Abby?
Yeah, just that I wanted to say thank you to everybody for the support, because as Angie's just said, I wouldn't be able to do this job without the support, and we wouldn't be where we are without it. So I just wanted to thank board for all of their support and everybody.
Thank you very much, Abby. And we look forward to having you back before too much longer to hear how you're getting on. So thanks again. So that concludes item 5. So we're going to go straight on, please, to item 6, which is the board team brief. Which I have explained to some of my colleagues used to appear on the board meeting in private, but on the back of a discussion with Angie, we thought it would be rather sensible, considering we're not discussing MI5 or 6's activities, merely completing the loop and closing the loop on a good cascade brief in the interest of a working back up as well as just down, that it should be on the public meeting. So here it is. All yours, Angie.
Thanks, Helen. And you'd think we planned this agenda, wouldn't you, in the way that Abby's just introduced it, and that conversation Helen and I were having about why it was in private board. And team brief, as you'll all know and see from the paper, we've been doing regularly. And it was just to make sure that we are, again, thinking as a board around what our people are saying to us. I've been very keen that we don't just brief them on our conversations, that we do listen to what they're saying. And in my ideal world and my aspiration is that us as a board are then informed back from what we get back from that team brief. So it's not just that one way. I think we're a work in progress. We had a few tumbleweed moments last time. Everyone assured me that was because we were all in reflective mode. And actually we did it after informal board. And again, I've been very keen that Helen and I continue to give messages after board meetings each month, whether they're in public or not, and the messages that we give to everyone about the investment we've made in the development as us as a board, and how we lead and are a high performing board, for me are very important that our teams understand that. I think colleagues can contribute. I think we had some good discussion on the back of those, as well as maybe some of the meaty items that we had. So it was just to give board that opportunity to hear the conversations that result out of us briefing our leaders following this meeting, and to look for your support, whether it's through the briefing or when you're out and about, to encourage people both to attend, to use the briefing, and to help us inform us around the areas that they want to see us discussing around the board table.
Thanks very much, Angie. An important tool in the whole box of engagement and communication craft. So thank you for reinvigorating this element of it. I don't see any hands, so I'm going to take it that we're happy to note that approach and move on. We've got a big item next, item 7. So item 7 is where we hear from each of the chairs of the committee. And we have an opportunity in that regard to have escalated to the board from the committees any issues with respect to the integrated performance report, the risk register, and as a consequence, any amendments that might be necessary to the board assurance framework. So very important item. So we're going to start off, please, with Alison and the report from the Finance and Performance Committee.
Thank you very much, Helen. So I think this update is primarily going to concentrate on financial conversations. I'm pleased to report that from a performance point of view, our A&E performance continues to perform very well, exceptionally well, in terms of improvement and consistency. So very pleased with that. And the conversations about restoration and recovery and managing the COVID situation, where we're now down to 0 COVID patients in the hospital, but then moving into restoration and recovery around performance of other services is all on track, and I can provide the board with assurance around that. We've started to consider the financial environment and the financial arrangements going forward for the next year, which there is a further paper on. And in light of those conversations, the recommendation from Finance Performance is that the 2 risks, BAF risks that we're accountable for, are increased in score from 12 to 16. And that's in recognition of the first half of the year will be a continued payment, but the second half of the financial year will require much more detailed management, and the same around integration of performance and continued performance and recovery. It's a complex picture, as the board will appreciate, and therefore our recommendation as a committee is that we should increase the risk scores to 16. I don't know if Berenice or Lee want to add anything to that commentary, or any other committee members, but that's the update from Finance and Performance.
Thank you very much, Alison. Any other committee members want to add anything to Alison's report? No, take it you've done a good job, Alison. I'm going to go, Berenice. No, Berenice, that was a quick wave. So thank you for that report. I'm going to move on, if I may, please, to Mike and the report of the Audit and Risk Committee, please.
Thanks, Helen. The Audit and Risk Committee met on the 23rd of March, seems like quite a while ago now. 4 key things that we discussed. We had an update from our counter-fraud colleagues at 360. The government appear to have changed the way they're reporting counter-fraud, and there's quite a lot of work going on because none of the organisations across the UK are apparently compliant with this new framework. So we had quite a discussion around that, and we may have to just sort of re-look at the way we do our counter-fraud risk reporting. But a fairly dry subject, but we get good advice from 360, so we're on to that one. We also had some good news from 360, who said that our follow-up rate on internal audit reports had improved considerably, which was good. So thanks to Angie, Lee, and all the execs around for making sure that happens. We know how busy everybody's been, but it's good that it's important that we get a good head of internal audit opinion at the end of the year, and this was potentially riding on that. So thank you very much for all your hard work on that. I know internal audit is a dry subject sometimes when you've got people dying around the hospital, but I very much appreciate it. Thank you. We also approved the internal audit plan for next year, which has got some sensible things that the exec team wanted to look at, and as usual, a sensible amount of flexibility built into the plan. We had an update from our external auditors, mainly on value for money. There's a lot of government work being focused on asking the audit firms to audit us for value for money. More fees, I'm afraid, but probably useful information that we'll get out the back of it. So that process is ongoing, as indeed is the annual report on accounts process that we usually go through this time of year, and we've got a couple of audit committees in the diary in the next few weeks for page turning and signing off the accounts. As I think you guys probably know, whilst Alison's financial performance committee is all about control totals and internal financial performance, the ARC committee is a bit more about external financial reporting and the all-in statutory accounts, including those of DSFS. So good committee, we're keeping them quite short, given everybody's fairly busy, but nothing contentious and no real risk to change on our BAF framework.
Thank you very much, Mike. Comprehensive report. Any additions or queries or comments on the back of that? No, in which case let me move through, please, to Jeremy and the report of the People Committee, please.
Helen, sorry, do you want me to do the oversight one? Is that follow one?
Oh, sorry, that would be a sensible time to do it, of course. Thank you, Mike.
Sorry, yeah, just a very quick one. We met on the 26th of April. This is the oversight committee between sort of the DSFS subsidiary and the trust. Very quick, efficient meetings. I've been hugely impressed with the way the trust and the subsidiary are working. I don't think in our wildest dreams we would have hoped it would have worked out this well with some of the upheaval we were going through. We're still having some challenges with getting people back to work, obviously in the back offices due to social distancing, but Dennis is all over it. We agreed some commercial advertising would be placed around the hospital where there was an opportunity to so do. And there was a flyer that got sent out to some people. I got one sent to me in the post about the DSFS strategy. So all good news. Dennis is doing a great job, and it is very much one family across Chesterfield, which is great.
Thank you, Mike. Jeremy.
Thank you. Just a quick question on that, if I may. It caught my eye under the financial update paragraph that there's reference to a contribution to trust charity, which, if I knew about that, I'd forgotten. Does that imply that DSFS is contributing cash to the charity?
I believe it is, yes. This is part of the well-being, but Lee's probably better placed to answer that.
Yes, it does, Jeremy. So we found a mechanism for the subsidiary to donate to the charitable arm of the trust, which was an expedient thing to do at year end, but I'm happy to give you further details. But we've discussed that certainly at Finance and Performance Committee and at ARC. But sorry, you haven't been made aware of it as a board. It's a good spot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Jeremy, we'll stay with you, please, for the report of the People Committee.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of things really to highlight from the written report. Firstly, obviously, as we've referenced already, we spent time talking about the staff survey and in particular the year-end summaries from the divisions on their engagement activities over the previous year, because we're very keen to be assured at the People Committee that all the work being done in the divisions is actually having an impact, and kind of close the circle on that. And linked to that, the hearing about the ED&I, particularly the less good reports from BME staff about bullying and harassment and so on, and covered that off. The other thing that was referenced, and again we've referenced this, I think we've referenced this already today, about the international position and the recruitment of nurses from India. This People Committee actually was on the 21st of April, which was just as things were beginning to get bad in India, and we know that they've got worse still since then, and that has impacted on the recruitment of staff. So we covered that as well. But otherwise, the report should be taken as read.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Questions, thoughts, comments on the back of that? No, in which case let's go to Jane for the report of the Quality Assurance Committee, please.
Thank you, Helen. So we held an extraordinary QAC on the 28th of April. We have been using a deep dive mechanism to look at a number of topics. So this one was particularly focused on infection prevention and control. You haven't got a written report, or at least not one that you received in a timely manner because of the timing of the meeting. So forgive me if I just talk through some of the content. this also ties in with assurance that was given to ARC as well through 360 review of infection prevention and control, and some further information that was required. So I think you'll see that we've actually given a really good examination to infection prevention and control, particularly in the context of our COVID patients. So the meeting looked in particular at 4 papers that were provided. One related to patients that had acquired COVID whilst in our care. One related to the update of the IPC board assurance framework. One paper was related to the health and safety executive review of 17 trusts, particularly looking at things like risk assessments. I should emphasise we weren't one of the trusts that was inspected under that, but we actually have taken the recommendations and done a gap analysis in order to inform our own practice. And the fourth thing that we looked at was feedback from the CCG, who we asked to come in as a critical friend to look at our infection prevention and control mechanisms, and actually to go out onto ward areas and actually give us feedback on those things. Of course, we also looked at the lessons learned from all of those 4 reports. And I really wanted to emphasise that in all cases of those 4 papers or reports, we looked not only at the process, but also examined all the underpinning statements that were made in the reports. So, for example, on the one related to COVID patients and people that had acquired infection in our care, those cases have been examined by the medical examiner, and also we have looked at how that relates to also the duty of candour and also complaints and litigation. In terms of assurance, we had significant assurance from all 4 papers. We had significant assurance from 3 of the 4 papers. The one with limited assurance was the HSE paper, and actually that requires us to do some work on risk assessments, particularly around office environments. And again, we were assured that there was an action plan in place, and that was being addressed in a very, very timely manner, and we'll see that reported back at our next meeting. In terms of the findings, just so that board are aware, there were some very consistent findings across the board, and our action focus is now on some very specific things. So one of the things is about face covering for patients in ward areas. We need to improve our performance on that, and that's now being regularly audited. The second thing was about staff compliance with distancing and also wearing of masks, etc. And we need again to look at the policy on that, and also to think about how that is further enforced. We also, the third thing that was came out, which was a very strong recommendation, and it's something again that we've talked about as a board, was about the environment and the relationship to the estate strategy. So we've got some issues around ventilation and side rooms that we need to take account of in terms of capital investment, and also when we're redeveloping areas. From the CCG report, there was one further aspect, and that was about maternity area in terms of the birth centre and the readiness, if you like, of birthing rooms in terms of infection control for the kind of the next person to go into that room. In terms of the local ownership of all of these issues, in terms of how we are progressing those actions, again, we looked at how the mechanisms all kind of fit together. So how does the care unit information sit, and how does that fit with the divisional assurance, and how does that work its way up to quality delivery group? And again, we were very assured by the processes in place. We've seen evidence previously where we've had infection control audits that have given us information, but what we haven't been able to do is adapt the learning across the trust. So that was a really key part of our discussions. So all of the things have got action plans sitting behind them, which we're going to monitor through normal QAC, and our next meeting is on the 17th of May. And at that meeting, we'll be taking consideration of any changes to the BAF. Can I just invite Helen, anybody else that sat on the extraordinary QAC, if there's anything that they want to make a comment on, because it was a particularly detailed meeting, and again, just to give assurance that it's a mechanism that we really want to use through QAC, because it does give us time to really look into an issue in some depth, and that has proven this year to be really helpful to us.
And the whole board, Jane, a phenomenal sort of assurance at a time when there are so many moving parts, and the risk profile has so fundamentally changed in the trust for all the reasons we understand. So enormously grateful to you for the diligence and tenacity with which you're identifying and following through on important lines of inquiry. Atul would like to come in.
Thank you, Helen. I mean, I think as a sort of the non-clinical person on the committee, I was most impressed really by the way we just spent those 2 hours. I also agree, you know, Jane sort of helped to navigate us through all the sort of different issues and sort of looking at it from the point of view of an outside observer, you might say. I was very assured by the diligence with we went into these issues and the openness and transparency, if you like, to talk about that. 2 particular issues I took a lot of assurance on was the thing about the duty of candour, that in terms of the hospital-acquired COVID mortality review, I think it's important to be in touch with patients and their families when these kinds of issues occur, and I was very assured by that. And the second particular one was to have the CCG coming in as a kind of peer, helping us look at issues from a different pair of eyes, but also equally expert, if you know what I mean. So I thought I was very engaged by these two hours, which I hadn't expected to be. So it was really good. Thank you.
Thank you, Atul, including for your own candour. Any other comments on that? Well, again, a huge thank you. This is really important work, and I suppose important for us to reflect on how it is the board can function as it does because of the assurance that we've taken, not only from the Quality Assurance Committee, but all of the committee reports and the extent of the detailed work that's happening there, and the pattern and rhythm we seem to have established now of getting material and significant issues escalated in a timely fashion to board. So thank you. That brings us on, if we may please, to item 8, which is the Royal Primary Care Strategy and the 6-month update or review.
Sorry,
Berenice. Jeremy.
Sorry, just before we move on, if I may, I noted in looking at this item, because I think it's the first time we've looked at these new BAF risks in the format they're in now, and perhaps I should have picked this up previously, but in the previous BAF, there was an item that covered off our environmental strategy and carbon reduction and related responsibilities, which has kind of got lost in the new formulation. So I'm looking at page 105 on the PDF pack, but it used to be BAF 6.2, and it's got incorporated into BAF 3, which is all about system working. And I just wanted to flag up that I don't think we should lose that point. I think we need to perhaps reconsider how we keep an oversight at board level of our environmental performance and the risks associated with that.
I'm sure Angie will be happy to respond to that particular point, but also, Angie, you might want to draw our attention more generally to the reformulation. Feel free.
Thank you, Helen. Yes, I was going to ask the board to consider, particularly we've got our risk appetite session next month. This is a first draft of the reports that will come through to board. So picking up Jane's point around how much detail we discuss in the subcommittees, how do we reflect that in the strategic BAF overview is a work in progress. So I think Jeremy's point also illustrates that we maybe just need to keep backwards and forwards with the format of the documents, but can board colleagues think about what they want to see and how they want to see it. And when I first looked at them, I thought, why do we need those graphs? They look particularly boring. But actually, if you think about the trend over time, it will get more interesting. So it's early days. They are work in progress, and grateful for comments on the format that means we can have that quick overview in sight, but get the detailed assurance we need at board.
Thank you very much, both. Berenice, RPC, please.
Keith was just going to do a little introduction and then I'll go straight through the detail, if that's okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Helen. Thanks, Bernice. So you'll be familiar that we brought the RPC 5-year strategy to the board midway through 2020, which the board approved and the governors had sight on. We said that as part of that process, we'd come back in 6 to 8 months to show our progress and to review that. It's probably, I think, more like 8 to 10 months, just based on the way the board meetings have fallen. There's been a real level of progress here, but I do think we have to probably note in this, obviously the COVID, also the vaccination programme that primary care have been hugely involved in, and I think also the illness accident to a key team member as well as part of RPC in the last few months. So whilst a lot of progress has been made, I think it's fair to say not quite as much progress as perhaps without those factors. But I think just before Berenice kicks off, this is really about front foot, and this is really about how RPC can move forward positively and proactively as part of this plan. And it's all about moving forward and less about where we've been in the past and where we've come from, I think, is a fair case. So I will hand over to Berenice to take you through the detail.
Thanks for that, Keith. And obviously I'll take it that people have read the presentation slides, but it would be amiss of us if I didn't just highlight our priorities for RPC, improving our population health and wellbeing, building collaboration, transformation and integration, addressing the funding inequalities, pursuing excellence and empowering people. It's extremely important. And I think what's really important to say is that no matter what direction the current demands or strategies take us, that the RPC always have the vision based on the Joined Up Care Derbyshire in their sights, and it's very clear through the discussions that we've had in preparing this pack that they always come back to that system level working. Constantly the team are scanning new guidance, changes in the landscape and adjusting the plans, aiming to remove any barriers so that they can continue to deliver. And you'll recognise yourselves that this doesn't go without challenges. What's really important is to point out the developing relationships that RPC should be seen as a primary care. Now, this is it's part of our primary care. It's not the only primary care, and that should be brought into the mix. I think previously we've looked at positive integration because we manage an arm of primary care. What we're trying to do is, and we need to do, is build strong relationships directly between primary care in totality and secondary care. And as a result of that, we've already started a huge amount of that work, engaging with PCNs, involving primary care in all of the pathway development to ensure that there's cohesive transformation, because it's unbelievable how many times that we have a meeting and it's kind of that part is being missing from the discussions and the conversations. So we're very focused on that, and as part of that, I think what we'll do is we'll start to gain that trust and definitely build those relationships, that this isn't kind of some sort of takeover. This is about how we can work together to make sure that we get the best outcomes for patients. We've got lots of examples of that through what we've delivered in urgent care and in planned care already. The 5-year goals are very aspirational, and the plan actually commences from April this year moving forward. But what's positive to see, as Keith's already alluded to, is the progress that's been made despite competing priorities. So the restructuring of delivery of primary care, just around responding to COVID, the way that they've had to configure themselves, support an intensive vaccination programme that Keith's already mentioned to, and then key individuals unexpectedly not being about. I think they've done an absolutely brilliant job in the amount of work that they've actually delivered. The focus around joined up care system working is really important, because if the system doesn't succeed, then we can't succeed with Royal Primary Care. So it's really, really important that we kind of keep that in mind. I just wanted to pull out a few of the recent achievements. They're really proud that they've appointed a GP lead for population health. We all know how important this is, and to do that investigation, the evidence of what we're trying to move forward. So we need to focus, that intense focus on where the actions need to be. Improved uptake and outcomes of a number of areas around asthma, med reviews, hard to reach groups. It's been really positive to see the progress that's been made around these areas. There's been really good collaboration with the PCNs to deliver well needed posts such as pharmacy and first contact physio. So that's about the PCNs actually commissioning those services themselves, and putting them across where those hard to reach groups are and where the requirements are. Delivering efficiencies via major business by major service reconfiguration around the businesses and some of the back office workforce, and also that reduced locum agency spend. They've made dramatic improvements around that, so recruiting permanent staff. An increase in training across the multidisciplinary teams, so GP lead in training, system training around practice nurses has been really positive. So staff are accessing training leading the Chesterfield way. Staff are now partaking in the survey. We've just heard from Zoe around the staff survey results, and I think they were all shocked to see some of the results coming out. But what's really important is that this is the only section of primary care that undertake a survey of this type and this depth. And we're already learning from that, and it's helping them understand where they need to focus. So RPC are really focusing moving forward on patient long-term conditions. I think everybody's aware that there are a group of people that probably haven't had the focus that they require this previous year. So they're aiming for 100% QOF, absolutely going to achieve it. And that's going to be the full nursing team's focus for next year. There's really positive approaches from other primary care services, and they're really looking to make this a great place to work. And I just want to give an example of something that that's been put in place around healthy eating, where they've set up a service between Morrison's and the colleges, along with RPC. And what's important about this is that this service is open to anyone who visits Chesterfield can access this education and this support. It's not only down to RPC. So it's just another example of where they're thinking wider. So I'll pause there. I think that they've made really good progress with a strategy. It's very easy to see what they've outlined and what their next steps are. And just welcome Lee if there was any kind of final comments, because he has certainly supported this piece of work.
I'm very happy to chip in, Berenice. I genuinely think this is in good shape now in terms of direction of travel. I think it's really positive, and I think from my perspective, just delineating slightly the role of RPC from our role to engage in primary care. I think historically we've put them in a slightly tricky position. RPC trying to advocate for CRH in the primary care space. I think what this teases out is how do we engage as a secondary care organisation more fully with primary care and not just use RPC as that vehicle. So I think there's some really positive conversations now taking place with the Chesterfield PCN, which candidly, Berenice, I think it's slightly easier for you and I to conduct than our lead in RPC, just because of the slightly different wiring of how our primary care arm works compared with more mainstream primary care. But I won't necessarily elaborate on that here and now. But I think we're in a really good spot. I think much better than we have been is my take.
Thank you. It is feeling a very strong position. So thanks for that and the support. Thanks, Helen.
Thank you, Alison.
Thanks, Helen, and thanks, Berenice. A really comprehensive update, so thank you for that. I think Lee may have touched slightly on the question I was going to ask, because there is a slight dichotomy in Chesterfield managing its representation within RPC and the broader PCN, and we've had conversations about the capacity of our senior team, particularly following the senior person having an accident. In the developing governance arrangements for the PCN, do you see an opportunity there, or how do you think we should be managing that relationship differently, with both our heads on of managing our PC but also interacting with the PCN? Have you got any comments on that?
Thanks, Alison, and apologies that that didn't come across strongly enough in the update. But I think there has been some real benefit from the understand of governance, because and I'm going to mention Jo Lacey, who she previously worked within secondary care and understands the level of governance that's required to give that oversight that hasn't necessarily been in place in primary care and independent providers. So she's been able to transfer that across and establish that for RPC, and then share that with the actual PCNs. I think what Lee was alluding to has been really helpful, is the fact that Lee and I are able, along with Keith as well, is able to kind of separate that out from it being an RPC is telling you to do this, to how can secondary and primary care work together and have that independent line between the two. So we've had some extremely positive discussions as a result of that, and agreement around the governance arrangements from Chesterfield PCN.
Thank you.
Splendid progress, both in terms of relationships and practical action to improve patient experience. So very well done, and real hope of realising the vision we set out to achieve at the outset of this endeavour, which of course was about much better integration of primary and secondary care. So I feel we've come a long way in a short space of time. So a big thank you to you and everyone who's helped you in the endeavour, Berenice, and of course acknowledging Keith's contribution on behalf of NEDS too. So thank you. Now, I'm very mindful of the time, and I was slightly alarmed. We got a message to say your meeting concludes in 5 minutes. I didn't know if we were all going to hit some sort of black hole. But it was a helpful reminder that we, I think, have transitioned to what might be a full board agenda, while still endeavouring to maintain the timings we had when the trust was in the grips of COVID and we were trying to pare back meetings to a bare minimum. So I'm afraid you're going to have to bear with us, and particular apologies to the two members of the public we have. We're not in the habit of meetings running late in Chesterfield, but I think, as I say, we're in something of a transition in this meeting. But on that note, I wonder, given that the priorities and operational planning for 21-22 have been rehearsed within an inch of their lives at the Finance and Performance Committee, if we might have the abridged version of board. And I think that request applies also in terms of investment in maternity workforce and training, given that Quality Assurance Committee have been all over this like a rash, if you'll forgive the expression. And I understand we're really just looking for the formal improvement, the increase in resources today. So again, if we might have the abridged version of that, I will be grateful. And then that will leave us to have some time on patient and staff experience report. So without further ado, Lee, please, on item 9.
Helen, I'm just going to give an overview, and then if Lee wants to come in on the finances. Thanks, Helen. Honestly, really quickly then, the first time we've developed a system plan, and I think it's really important to point that out. So there's a lot of hard work that has gone in, a lot of darkened rooms, and then that in itself has brought a lot of challenges. We're also splitting this plan into kind of 2 halves. So this is the first 6 months, and then we'll have to refresh with our longer term vision around the plan. What I'll say is it's so far the submission that is being prepared to go off on the 6th of May as the draft is in a pretty good place now. We are basically identifying that we're going to achieve most of the requirements of that operational plan. There's a couple of ambers identified there, but nothing that we think we can't resolve. One of them around learning disabilities, and another around kind of mental health requirements that we need further work to do. There are some risks identified around capacity, including the workforce. So obviously we understand all of those around bed base, around the finance and the ability to sustain the delivery of recovery, the COVID-19 vaccine non-delivery. So we hope we can keep to time. The health inequalities, we've still got quite a piece of work to do around the health inequalities, just to make sure that we tie that down and we're focusing in the right areas. And the prevention, there's been a bit of a lack of focus on prevention while we've all reacted to COVID, so there's further work to do around that. It's positive to see that we are looking to achieve an enhanced recovery plan, so we will be able to secure additional funding to support increased delivery of elective programme, and everybody is focused in on that, and there's obviously a number of caveats around that about ensuring we keep our length of stay, ensuring that we continue with the great work that we've had around admission avoidance at the front door to allow those electives in place. And Angie and I were both at an orthopaedic meeting yesterday, and I heard a really good argument put forward around our orthopaedic patients and about having an incident around orthopaedics, because that is one of our long waiters. Just making sure that we make sure our electives are as important as the non-elective capacity that's coming through the door. So I'll leave it there. You've had the papers, and just whether Lee, do you want to add anything around finances?
Very tiny amount, noting the time, just being very clear on this sort of first half of the year versus second half of the year thing, which we've just got to be very mindful of. So the first half of the year looks broadly fine financially, not without risk, but was it ever thus? But to be honest, it's very hard to make claims about second half of the year, not least because the Department of Health and Social Care hasn't completed its negotiations with the Treasury about how much money the whole of the NHS will get for the second half of the year in terms of legacy COVID costs and other issues. So we're in this slightly odd space about a plan for the first half of the year, which then will reiterate with a closer understanding to it. So it's a very unusual planning round, both operationally and financially, I would claim. And just because it's been system first, we perhaps just need to think through how do we get good and better developed touch points into the statutory boards about this work we've had to do very rapidly. Might be worth noting too, but that's probably enough from me, if not too much.
Thank you. And Helen, just to say that once we have the final submission, which has all the detail, we will share that with all board members so that you can see exactly what we're aiming to achieve.
Thank you, Berenice and Lee. Alison.
Thanks, Helen. In the interest of time, just a very short comment from me. We could fall into the trap of thinking that we're returning to stability. And I'd just caution board that actually this is a plan that will need revisiting, both in terms of ongoing developments of COVID, our ability to restore and recover elective and non-elective, and the developing pressure on finances, both revenue, cost and capital. So normally we would, in normal years, we would set a plan, performance and finance plan, that we would minimally revisit apart from monitoring performance. I think, as Lee says, this year is an unusual year and we should be ready to revisit this a number of times over the next financial year.
Thank you, Alison.
A note in the comments from Jeremy that you might have anticipated, Berenice, so yes. you've got an opportunity to put that one right prior to its final outing aboard. So thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Very good. So thank you for that. I'm going to move on now, please, if I may, to the investment in maternity workforce and training. Krishna.
Thank you very much, Helen. So just briefly, then you'll have all read the papers. There is the attached awful to navigate through an NHSEI spreadsheet. So I've summarised really the main points about it. So I'm asking really for board just to approve the trust bid for a submission for national money. So there's a huge amount of sort of £95 million sort of nationally, and we've been asked to look at our bids. So we've identified, we do a Birth Rate Plus, which is a nationally validated workforce tool that's identified a shortcoming of just over 3 whole-time equivalents in our workforce, which is negligible really in the great scheme of sort of workforce issues. But actually it's also allowed us to put a bid in for opportunities to support service improvement and to also address some shortfalls in being able to adopt some of the workforce from a medical point of view, so ability to strengthen some of the issues that we've already known about, but it gives us this opportunity. So we've put in a bid for just over 400,000 for the rest of this year, and then a bid for 972. What we are anticipating is that we probably won't get it all, but we've put the bid in, and that it will come back to us end of May, beginning of June for a second round for us to have that discussion. But we need to submit this tomorrow, so it's really just asking if board are happy to support. Obviously, this has been done with full engagement of the clinical teams and DLT approval as well.
Thank you, Krishna. Can I take it that colleagues are content to approve the bid as Krishna has outlined? Lots of nods. Thank you. And again, a very short space of time on what I know has been a complete preoccupation, Krishna, for you and lots of others. So again, thanks for all you're achieving so quickly in response to the Ockenden imperatives. That brings us on, if we may, to item 11, which is staff and patient experience report. Who's kicking off on this one?
I'll start off, and then just a couple of things I want to draw out, and I'll hand over to Krishna. Thanks, Helen. So as an executive team, we've reviewed our priority teams for exec sponsor roles, looking at staff experience and patient experience, metrics and intelligence. The full details are in the paper, so you'll see there's some consistency from the previous year and some new teams as well. Personally, I'm quite excited about being the new exec sponsor for EMU SSU, which I think you'll appreciate, having met Stacey this morning. And the second thing I want to draw out of the paper was around our excuse me, national recognition for our staff engagement, and particularly around our staff survey results. So last year I was contacted by NHS employers to do a case study about our improving results on the back of last year's feedback, and that was delayed due to the pandemic, so it's recently been published and linked in the paper. And then this month we've been asked to contribute to a Share and Learn NHS employers event, which again is about the organisations who have most improved. This time around on the staff survey results have been asked to join that, so we will be joining that this month too.
Very good. Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks. I may be being a bit dim, Zoe, but on Appendix 1, can you just clarify what the difference is between the target and the ambition in that table? Or perhaps it's something to be picked up elsewhere.
I think that's the patient experience aspect of the ambition. So I might defer to Krishna on that one.
Okay, right, sorry.
Krishna, the floor is yours. Anything you want to add to Zoe's introduction?
I don't actually. I'm just conscious of time, so if there's any questions that anybody wanted to ask about any of the areas that we've visited from an exec point of view, I'm more than happy. Jeremy, just the ambition is within the national frame. We've not been set sort of the national targets, so it was sort of our ambition to sort of do a stretch target for sort of like the friends and family. And we've already seen sort of month on month sort of improvements with inpatients, and certainly sort of from an outpatients, and indeed ED in particular has been very consistent as well with really positive sort of comments from patients, especially with the new SDEC and sort of the new emergency sort of treatment centre sort of process going through.
Very good. Any other comments or questions on the report you have in respect of that item? No, happy to note the report then. Thank you very much. That is bringing us to the end of the agenda. We have now just consent items. I've had no advice of anybody wishing to raise any matters in respect to the consent items. We have invited our 2 members of the public to raise any questions, but we haven't had any at the moment. So that leaves me free to ask board members if there's any items of other business. No, in which case the next meeting is on the 7th of July, how the year flies, and brings us to the review of the meeting. Given that the board have a lot of opportunities to reflect on board effectiveness in the round, I'd like to offer the opportunity to our observers today to make any comments they may wish about whether they're more or less assured that the trust is in good hands, having observed the board meeting, or indeed any other comments they might want to make about our deliberations or dynamic. Can I go to you, Margaret, in the first instance?
Yes, thanks, Helen. Sorry, first of all, apologies that I got thrown out at some point. The computer threw a wobbly. So unfortunately, it was the item that I particularly was interested in, which was the RPC. But I think I came in just in time to hear and Berenice's comments about the sort of wider system and how RPC was fitting into that, which is really what I was most interested in. So apologies for that. Other than that, obviously it was a very, very good meeting. It was lovely to hear all the stuff from Abby. That was particularly inspiring. So no more comments other than that. Thanks.
Thank you. Judith?
No, I haven't got any comments at all. I was particularly encouraged to see the long consideration to RPC, which does make me feel somewhat better. But I was also very, very impressed by the staff contribution at the beginning. It was super.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very assured.
Graham?
Yeah, enjoyed it. Still a learning process. I enjoyed the bit from Alison because the company I work for, we did promote talking to you and talking to your bosses, so that it was a good two-way thing, and there was always this good communication up and down, to encourage people to bring things to you. So yeah, long may it continue. I'll be interested to talk to the staff when I get a chance on site, just to see, it in progress.
Thanks, Graham. Catherine, as you start off on your management journey with the NHS, have you been filled with delight or anything else?
It was really interesting, actually. Thank you. Yes, I thought Abby's section was particularly interesting, and how the fact that actually people are more comfortable to speak up, even though the figures are higher, actually it comes out as a good thing. So that was great. And also Stacey's section at the beginning was really interesting, and how those little things get in the way of operationalising these amazing changes. So that was helpful to see in practice. So thank you.
Well, don't let the fire go out on that as you progress through your NHS career, is our advice to you, Catherine. So thank you for taking the time to be here today. And last but by no means least, a guest star appearance by our former lead governor, Denise. Lovely you've taken the time to join us. What did you make of today?
I think it was a really good meeting, particularly Stacey at the beginning, being a nurse by background. Very interested to hear, because we keep rehashing the same discussions about things, tables in bays, etc., and then the need to move out. The one good thing I thought was a staff survey, particularly around the question 7. Our staff felt it was a particularly bone of contention when I was there, because the results were pretty poor. I'm pleased to say they really have improved, and they're improving year on year. And I think given the pandemic, I think everybody needs a real pat on the back, Zoe. I was a pain in the proverbial about that question when I was there, but I'm pleased to see that much improved. That's it from me.
Well, I think you deserve a bow on that one, Denise, as much as anyone else. Relentless focus, I think I would describe your approach over the years on that particular challenge. So thank you to everyone.